Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark, True Horror Stories, where we keep our promise of bringing you spine-chilling tales every night. Tonight, we have something truly terrifying for you, 5 true horror stories from Reddit's No Sleep. These are the kinds of stories that will make you question every shadow, every creak in the floorboards. As always, we invite you to turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready for an unforgettable experience. These stories are all based on real experiences, shared by ordinary people who have faced extraordinary terror. So sit back, relax, and let the fear take over. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another haunting tale. Get ready to hear 5 terrifying true horror stories that will leave you with chills. Story 1, Room 14 does not exist. My name is Jason Miller, I'm 32 years old, from Oregon, USA. I'm the kind of person who doesn't believe in anything unless I see it with my own eyes. I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in small town legends. I like things that are concrete, photos, documents, logic. That's why, in 2018, I began a personal project, a photo book about forgotten architecture across the United States. I spent weeks driving through abandoned towns and old inns in the Northwest. White Pine, Oregon, barely registers on a map. But I was drawn to an old photo I found in an archive, a picture of an inn from 1892 called the Hemsworth Inn. I drove there on a cold, rainy afternoon. The inn sat on a dirt road, surrounded by pine forests. There were no sounds of traffic, and no one else was in sight, except for me and the innkeeper, Marjorie. Right from the start, something unsettled me. The air in the inn was so old, it felt like time couldn't touch it. Marjorie handed me the key to room 12 and looked at me for a moment as though she wanted to say something, but she just softly muttered, "The second floor has 6 rooms. Don't go past room 13. I don't want to lose any more guests." I thought she was joking. The hallway on the second floor was slightly curved, with old wooden floors, and yellow, dim light flickering from the wall sconces. I saw rooms 11, 12. And then directly, room 15. There was no room 14. But the gap between room 13 and 15 was oddly wide, as though something had once been there and had been erased. That first night, I was awoken by a soft click, click, outside the hallway, like someone slowly walking in leather shoes. When I opened the door to look, there was no one there. But the temperature outside the hallway was noticeably colder than in my room. I turned on a mini motion sensor camera to see what was happening at night. The next morning, when I checked the footage, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. Right at 3:14 a.m., the camera recorded a shot of the hallway in front of my room, but it wasn't like before. The door to room 14 appeared. It creaked open. A pale, tall figure slowly stepped out of the door, then vanished as it passed the camera's lens. I was horrified but tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's a camera glitch, maybe it's just a light reflection, I reassured myself. But each following night, at the same hour, the same scene repeated. The door to room 14 would open. The figure would step out, stand in front of my door, not move, not say anything, not blink. I went back to ask Marjorie about room 14. She spoke in a low tone. Room 14 has been sealed off since 1972. A student died in there. Suicide. But his body was never found. The police came, dug up the floorboards. But there was nothing. No blood, no body. Just the knocking every night. I felt a chill run down my spine. I don't know what made me do it on the fifth night. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something, calling me. I stood in the gap between rooms 13 and 15, at 3:13 a.m. When the clock hit 3:14, the door appeared. No sound. But a pressure. Like the air thickened. I reached my hand out and touched the doorknob. It was cold as ice. I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was frozen in time, dusty furniture, a clock on the wall stuck at 3:14. The light flickered, as if it might burn out. The smell of mildew mixed with the scent of fresh blood. I heard a whisper behind me. But there was no one there. When I turned around, the door was gone. The room became utterly silent, no sound. No time. I started to hear knocking. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more knocks. I shivered and looked into the mirror on the wall. The mirror reflected me, but not me. The person in the mirror had hollow eyes, cracked lips, blood dripping from his mouth, and whispered, "I'm still here." I woke up the next morning, lying right in front of my door, my clothes covered in dust and dried blood. The camera was gone. The footage was gone. No one believed me. Marjorie just shook her head and said, "You're lucky. Some people go in there and never come out." I left Hemsworth in that night. A few months later, I began to suffer from insomnia. I set up a camera in my house to check. And, every night at 3:14 a.m., I received a motion detection alert. On the clip, there was the old brown door, the door I had walked through, slowly appearing in my bedroom. I've moved 3 times. But the door always finds me. After hearing this story, do you believe some things are better left unexplained? Which part gave you the creeps the most? Share your thoughts below. Story 2, The Whisper in the Campsite Tent. My name is Mike Henderson, I am 27 years old, and I live in Colorado. I love nature, hiking, mountain climbing, and especially camping alone. What's better than sleeping under thousands of stars, far from the noisy city sounds? Last fall, I decided to take a 4-day trip into Roosevelt National Forest, a place I had visited a few times but never ventured too far into. I brought enough food, a sturdy tent, a flashlight, a compass, a survival knife, all the essentials I thought I'd need. What I didn't know was that I was about to bring back something that no piece of equipment could defend me from. The first day passed quietly. I set up camp near a small creek, with only the sound of trickling water and the chirping of forest birds. There was no phone signal, but that only made me feel more peaceful. On the first night, while I was lying in my tent reading with a flashlight, I heard footsteps outside. Soft, steady, like someone walking around my tent. I sat up, turned off the light, and held my breath. No one. I pretended to cough loudly to scare them off, but the footsteps stopped as if the person was listening to me. I unzipped the tent and shined the flashlight outside, just the dark and trees. I assumed it was a forest animal, a deer, or maybe a raccoon. But it was too light to be an animal, and too rhythmic to be the wind. On the second night, things went far beyond the limits of logic. At 2:40 a.m., I was awoken by whispering, low, drawn out, like voices speaking from a distance. There were no footsteps, just whispers that seemed to seep through the layers of the tent. I couldn't understand the words, but there was a distinct tone, as if someone was reciting something ancient. Shivering, I unzipped the tent. The mist was thick now. My flashlight illuminated no more than 10 steps. And then, I saw it. A second tent. An old, worn-out tent about 30 meters away, with a faint red light inside, like an oil lamp. I had never seen this tent before. I was sure of it. I had checked the area thoroughly when I set up camp. I walked closer, but when I was about 15 steps away, the light inside went out. The tent collapsed as if it had deflated. I shined my light on it and moved closer, and realized, it wasn't a real tent. It looked like a three-dimensional shadow, just the frame of a tent, with nothing inside. I turned and ran back to my tent, hearing a hiss in my ear, like someone had just whispered right next to my neck. When I turned around, no one was there. I decided to leave early the next day. But it rained heavily, the roads were slippery, and the terrain was rough, so I was forced to stay another night. I set up camp in another spot, right by a small lake. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the tent, knife in hand, eyes wide open. Around 1 a.m., my tent started to shake lightly, as if someone was touching it from the outside. I shouted, "I have a weapon. Go away." No response. But the fabric of the tent slowly began to indent, from the outside, like an invisible hand. Then another hand, another indent. Then another. Then, 4 hands pressing in at once, from different directions. I stabbed the fabric with the knife, nothing. When I tore open the tent and rushed outside, I saw dozens of tiny footprints imprinted on the wet mud, like those of children, but all of them were facing the tent. None of the footprints were moving toward me. Only away, as if those invisible creatures had been surrounding me from the beginning. I left the forest early the next morning, exhausted, sleep-deprived, and panicked. When I told my friends, they all laughed. They said I was hallucinating from lack of oxygen or stress. I almost believed them. Until a month later, an anonymous package was delivered to my house. Inside was only an old, black and white roll of film, the kind used for Super 8 cameras. I had it developed and watched it. The film showed a man, sleeping in a tent. The camera was placed outside. The person filming quietly zoomed in on his face, then turned to the right. It was me. The film ended with an image of a hooded figure, facing the camera, whispering something in a language I had never heard. What would you have done if you were in the narrator's shoes? Do you think you could have escaped that terrifying situation? Let us know your feelings. Story 3, The Gatekeeper in the Basement. My name is Jamie Collins, 34 years old, and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. During college, I worked part-time at an old library on campus, a building constructed in the 1890s, with 4 upper floors and 1 basement that was never open to students. The library was beautiful during the day. But at night, when it was just me working the shift, everything seemed to turn into a different world. Quiet, heavy, and the sounds seemed to be sucked away. I never believed in ghosts until the night I went down to the basement, and met the gatekeeper. My job was to work the night shift on Fridays, from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Making sure students didn't cause trouble, cleaning up the tables, and turning off the lights. One night at the beginning of October, while I was checking the 2nd floor, I heard slow knocking sounds coming from somewhere below. It wasn't footsteps. It was knock, 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 like someone tapping on wood with their hands. I called the security guard via the intercom. They told me no one was allowed in the basement. But the knocking continued, lasting nearly 10 minutes. Then, suddenly, it stopped. I brushed it off. I reassured myself it was the water pipes or maybe rats. Until the following week, I heard it again, exactly at 10:43 p.m. I became obsessed with the knocking. It always came at the same time, every Friday, from the same spot, the C-section floor, just above the basement. I decided to break the rules and go down to the basement once. The door leading down was locked with a rusty padlock, but when I tried to turn it lightly, it opened easily, as if someone had unlocked it before. The basement was pitch dark. There were no lights. I used my phone's flashlight, scanning around, old bookshelves, brick walls with stains, and a small hallway leading to the far end of the basement. On the left wall, there was a scrawled message in chalk, the gatekeeper is awake. I laughed, thinking it was a prank by the students. But something moved beneath my feet. I shone the light down, nothing. But for a moment, I felt the floor tremble slightly, and the temperature dropped suddenly. I turned and ran out of the basement. That night, I had a fever. In a delirium, I kept hearing the knocking in my head. The next week, I told the library manager. He looked at me strangely, then quietly said, "You heard it too." I thought I was going crazy. I went back to the basement once again. This time I brought a small video camera. When I reached the wall with the gatekeeper is awake message, I set up the camera to film myself, intending to make a vlog. Then, the flashlight flickered out. A long screeching sound echoed, a sound like steel rubbing together. From the end of the hallway, I saw a short figure, hooded, with no face, just a black void where the face should be. I froze. It didn't walk, it slid along the floor, as if being dragged. Then it raised its arm and pointed at me. The arm was abnormally long, with fingers curled backward. I screamed and ran. As I crashed into the basement door, I clearly heard a whisper behind me, "It's your turn to guard the door." After that night, I quit my job. I never dared to return to the library campus for the rest of my college days. Last year, when I passed by the library, I saw that the basement door had been completely sealed with concrete. The new security guard asked me, "Were you a former employee? Ever heard of the night shift guy who disappeared?" They only found the video footage from the basement. I was speechless. I asked if there was still the footage. They said it had been confiscated. That night, I received an email from an unknown address, with no text, only an audio file attached. Inside was the sound of knocking, knock, 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 and after 43 seconds, a hoarse voice whispered, "Jamie, it's your turn." This story left us with more questions than answers. How did it make you feel about the unknown? Were you haunted by the same things the narrator experienced? Story 4, The Whisper Behind the Mirror. My name is Lena Roberts, I'm 29 years old, and I live in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. Last year, after a long breakup, I moved into an old apartment near the city center not because it was pretty, but because it was surprisingly cheap. The building was constructed in the 1960s, with red bricks and long, cold hallways. My room was on the third floor, and the only thing that bothered me was the old mirror in the bathroom, a mirror attached to the wall, not removable. I thought I could manage living with an ugly, old mirror. But I didn't expect that it would start watching me. The first week living there, everything seemed normal. But around the sixth night, while brushing my teeth in front of the mirror, I had the feeling that the reflection didn't quite match my movements. When I bent over to rinse my mouth, for a brief moment, I saw the reflection lag behind me by a beat. I turned the light up brighter and looked carefully. Nothing seemed off. I reassured myself it was probably just fatigue. But then, it happened again. Every night when I stood in front of the mirror, I felt like someone was standing with me, I just wasn't looking directly at it. One time, I decided to test it, raised my left hand, then my right, and quickly spun around. And at that very moment, the reflection in the mirror turned half a second slower than me. Around 2 a.m., I was awakened by a faint sound, like whispering. At first, I thought it was my neighbors playing the TV too loud. But as I sat up, I realized that the whisper was coming from the direction of the bathroom, the place with the mirror. I cracked the door open and listened carefully. I could clearly hear someone repeating, "Lena, look." I slammed the bathroom door shut. The next morning, I called a technician to remove the mirror. But when the technician came and checked, he said, "You can't remove it. It's part of the wall. Maybe behind it, it's hollow or leads to another room." I couldn't sleep that night. The whisper came again, this time saying, "Don't turn away." One night, after turning on the bathroom light, I saw small handprints like those of a child, faintly imprinted on the mirror from the steam, even though I hadn't taken a shower. I reached out and touched it, and the handprint pressed back. I jerked away. My eyes were glued to the mirror, and for the first time, I saw something inside. Not a reflection, but a foggy, dark room behind the glass where a little girl in a white dress stood, her head lowered, hair covering her face. She lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow, black pits, and her lips moved. "I've been here for so long. Lena, switch places." I screamed, hit the mirror, and ran out of the bathroom. The next morning, I checked into a hotel. I didn't return to the apartment for a week. When I went back to pack up my things, I brought a friend with me so I wouldn't be alone. The bathroom was quiet, and the mirror seemed normal. But when I looked back, in the lower left corner of the mirror, there was a small engraving I hadn't noticed before. "The first mirror is open. The second mirror will open when you leave." I immediately packed up and left the apartment for good. 3 months later, in the bathroom of the hotel I was staying in temporarily, I noticed the new mirror looked very similar to the old one. That night, after brushing my teeth, I bent down to wash my face. And when I looked up, I saw in the mirror, I was still bent over. Have you ever encountered something that made your heart race like the narrator did? What's your own unsettling experience? Tell us in the comments. Story 5, The Dormitory Below the Basement. My name is Chris Jansen, a freshman at a small university in the Midwest located in Iowa. The main dormitory was full, so the school placed me in the extended area, a section in the basement of an old administrative building, which had once been a biological research center in the 1970s. There was nothing remarkable about it except that my room was at the very end of the hall, next to a door that was always locked, no nameplate, no room number. I was told not to open that door, but no one explained why. I'm not easily scared. But after just a few nights, I began to understand why that room should have been left untouched forever. The first week passed normally until one night around 2 a.m., while I was listening to music through my headphones, I felt a slight vibration in the ceiling like someone was walking directly above me. I took off my headphones. And at that exact moment, a soft knock came from the locked door. I thought I had imagined it. But then, 3 more knocks, soft, rhythmic, like someone trying to get attention without making a loud noise. I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. But as I pulled away, a faint whisper came through the crack in the door. It's so cold here. I asked a few upperclassmen about the room. They just laughed and said, that room used to be a quarantine room for experiments. Some student tried to go in there, but they don't study here anymore. The next night, while I was sleeping, I dreamt I was standing in front of that door, and from the darkness inside, a voice echoed, "Chris. I know your name now." I woke up in a cold sweat. Outside, the knocking came again. I called security, but when they arrived, there was nothing unusual. The hallway cameras didn't show anything either. They looked at me with skepticism and advised me to get more rest. The next night, I set up my phone to record the door all night. The next morning, in the video, at 3:12 a.m., the door cracked open for a few seconds and from the darkness, a pale, waxy hand gently slid something under the door. I jumped. Under the door was a small piece of paper. "Don't let the light go out." I couldn't take it anymore. One night, I stole the spare key from the security office, something I still regret to this day, and opened the forbidden door. The musty smell hit me immediately. The room was empty, except for a rusty hospital bed and a two-way mirror attached to the wall. I shone my flashlight on it, and saw that the reflection didn't match. I was standing alone, but in the mirror, there was a shadowy figure standing behind me. I spun around. No one was there. As I stepped deeper into the room, the flashlight suddenly went out. I panicked and tried to retreat, but the door slammed shut. Complete darkness. I could feel cold breath beside my ear, and a hissing voice. "Now it's your turn to stay." I slammed on the door, screaming until my throat was hoarse, until security heard me and pulled me out. They didn't ask questions, just noted that I had violated the rules and immediately moved me out of the basement. Before leaving, I went back to grab my personal belongings. I took one last look at the locked door. And on it, in something that looked like graphite, there was a message that I definitely didn't write. "The newcomer has entered. Now it's time for the next one." I transferred schools after that semester. But every night, before I sleep, I leave the light on. Because I still hear the knocking on the door even though I no longer live there. The twist at the end, did you see it coming? How did that final revelation change your perception of the story? We'd love to hear your reactions. And there you have it, 5 terrifying true horror stories that are sure to keep you up at night. We hope you survived this chilling experience with us here at Whispers in the Dark True Horror Stories. Which one of these stories left the biggest impression on you? Was it the eerie footsteps in the dark, or the unexpected twists that you just couldn't shake off? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. If you enjoyed these spine-tingling tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a new terrifying story, delivered to you every night before you sleep. Thank you for joining us tonight, and remember, the dark is full of secrets, and we'll be here to whisper them to you.